Oh yeah. Cool. So I got
There
kicked
we
out.
go.
Fun, and we're live. So many devices, so little time. It's Trusty 8 Podcast. I'm back with Gaming with Silverwolf. And Tobin in the side chat. Oh, I can't do it out loud right now. Be like, start howling like I'm a watch the rise of the
I got
planet of the apes.
one.
Right. So many plot holes with an exaggerated depiction of ape mannerisms. I know, right? It's kind of offensive when you think about it. And we misrepresent our kind. Jeez. All right. How are you doing, Silver Wolf? Glad to see you
I'm
again.
doing pretty good.
I know you're like, do you want me to answer that question honestly?
Yeah.
All right. So we're here to chat a little bit about a recent conversation we had,
Mhm.
and I wanted to ask you some questions. And I know that over the last day or two, you've kind of had some other interactions about the conversation we had on your channel. By the way, you can mirror this on your channel. I left that on the link if you want to. I don't know if you want to or not, but let's see.
Okay.
It's like in the StreamYard thing, so you could just like literally.
Oh yeah, it says stream to your audience, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
If you want to, only if you want
Okay.
to. So you've had some people, it sounds like, kind of coming after you, or a person, I should say, an individual that kind of came after you about the conversation we had, or do you want to talk about that at all?
Um, I don't really necessarily know whether or not if it was actually towards the stream that we did at all. It was kind of weird the way he put it, but if I don't know, I don't know if he actually checked it out or not. But if he did, whatever. Um, but all I can really say is he kind of did seem like he was more of attacking me and the people that I was around with. So I don't know how to like really explain that.
Yeah. And you'll, I mean, you hear that from the religious people a lot. Like, well, if you're talking with skeptics, then you must be skeptical, and then it kind of excommunicates you, like by like guilt by association, right? And I don't hear so much about that from spiritualists, but I mean, I'm assuming that it is a thing.
I don't know. All I know is he did seem a little bit of like pissed off of like what the fuck we're doing, which I don't really care honestly. Um but I'm not really like I it's really hard to explain just because like I'm not used to being around a lot of certain people, especially like people kind of like a little bit like him. But if he says whatever, don't mind my background. They're
Same here.
watching they were they're watching a game, so he's pretty fucking loud. Um
We got the same
so
thing going on the street. I hear him hooting right now.
yep, pretty much fucking there's a game going on, so don't mind my background. Um
It's either the church folk or the football folk, right? You can't get away from
yeah, like what the fuck? But with that a little bit of that reaction um did kind of in a way confuse me a little bit because I wasn't sure whether or not if he was actually only attacking me or if it was because I have skeptics and I'm a half skeptic. Like, I don't know.
it. This, okay, sorry, this fly is like really, really bugging me. See the fly? He's like, fall up in my grill. Um, okay, so that was, I would call that a sufficient answer. So, and I don't want to focus much on that. I do find it interesting. I think from what you showed me, it seems like he must have looked at it. Seems like he was objecting to my presence, but that was my take on it. So maybe I'm taking that one personally, but
I don't know.
so but that's also why I brought you here and why I wanted to have this conversation because I don't want to like poo poo on what you're doing. I'm still interested
Yeah.
in doing the Ghost Pack show. I think it's fascinating. But at the same time, I wanted to kind of deconstruct some of the things that you said. So you kind of had
Okay.
an experience when you were younger, right?
Yes.
And in your experience, it seems like you learn things later on in life that seem to make that inexplicable experience make more sense. Does that
Y-
sound right?
yeah, kind of. It's very it is a very interesting way of putting it. But all I can really say is like I'm still trying to question of like why did this happen or as to like where did it come from in some kind of way like why now am I finally actually kind of getting to know a little bit more about it and not years ago. It's like it's a little weird.
So I don't know. Do you want to talk about that a little more, like what the experience was? I know we've already told the story. I don't want you to have to relive it
Yeah.
over and over. But
It's not reliving it. Perhaps it's more of like trying to remember of that specific day, that specific time of like what the fuck kind of thing on what was I really actually talking to? Like what was I actually really friends with that I thought maybe was actually nice or not? Like I don't know. Um it seems like with that episode didn't really give me any of the answers, but some things part of that kind of put in a little bit of pieces together of like, okay, whatever the fuck happened at that point actually makes a little bit of sense of there was some weird coincidence on with my interaction and with someone else's interaction kind of almost at the same time, but it doesn't really go into people's minds of um oh like is this an actual kid kind of thing? Like, is this something that this kid is gonna grow out of? Doesn't really always work that way.
yeah, and it doesn't seem like something that indicates like when people usually talk about hauntings, they they talk about somebody who has passed away. Their soul or their spirit is kind of inhabiting that place. You'll have like a haunted house, and like family after family will move in there, and they'll all see the same apparition, right, or something like that. But this is very different, where you've got uh, a deceased child visiting other children, right, and
Yeah.
only while they're children. And oh, Tobin, no, we're talking about a private conversation as far as that. It wasn't a troll. It was
Yeah,
a
no.
private conversation that was had. So no, you didn't miss anything there.
Yeah,
Um,
no.
sorry, just saw that. So, but it is, I think, more common for children to have quote unquote imaginary friends and feel like they are real or interact with them as if they're really there with them
Uh-huh.
than like random hauntings like that only happens every once in a while, right? It seems like if you were looking for like a more average or a more common story, I should say, then this would be a place to start, right? Be like, okay, why do all these kids have these strange interactions with people they can't see, or something like that, right?
Yeah, that is correct. Also sorry about that weird fucking interaction. um, she just fucking came out of nowhere. Um, basically, with it is kind of fascinating on with the children thing on like what can they see that we can't? Why can they see that we can't? Kind of thing, and on how long is this gonna actually go for? Like, if it's gonna affect them physically or mentally in some kind of way, that kind of thing.
Well, so okay, and to be clear, you said you only had those experiences when you were young, right? So you don't have them anymore,
Yeah.
but you have memories of them.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's something there to where as children we're more impressionable, and so we may, when I say we give in to our imaginations or we process reality in a different way, I don't want to say that there's no real outside information that's being had there, right? Because if you're having an experience, it has to come from somewhere. I mean, experiences do happen internally in minds, right? But when
Right.
you have a very specific experience that seems external to your mind, it makes you want to have a greater explanation for it.
Yeah.
It's not like I can say, "Oh, I had a crazy dream," and I can just sum it up as having a crazy dream. I can say, "Oh, it happened in my mind." It seemed very real, but it definitely was not. But you have the sense that this experience was real.
Yeah. The only thing I can really remember is like I don't actually recall physically seeing it. I like it's I don't know. Like I don't really actually remember seeing it all. It's kind of weird the way it really happened. Because there are some things that might have happened that I don't really actually remember of recollections, but it's something to where god damn it. um Getting interruptions over here, god damn it. So it's almost as if I may have kind of seen it, but didn't actually really know whether or not if it was like actually real or not.
I think you mentioned. Did you say you could see it with when you closed your eyes? So it's more like a
Yeah, it
vision
was
of the
more
thing.
when I close my eyes I can see them. Yet that's someone on my side, fucker. Why did you have to send me a goddamn message before you come? Rude. Um Basically, it's definitely I know like there's a lot of other people who actually can see without closing their eyes, which I do kind of want to like question of, but with me, it's just something that only when I close my eyes. It's very weird. Ghost, I can't with you. I can't, Chris. Oh, you killed me. Um, yeah, I don't know what the fuck to say to that anymore. But yeah, it's
So when
just
you're talking,
something.
go
What?
ahead.
No, you.
Well, when you were talking about what are the effects, and I guess how do you think how do you think this affected you personally? Like, what is it about the experience other than it not being easily explainable that makes you still now kind of, or it seems like you have a bit of a fascination with that particular memory, right? So it had some
Yeah,
sway, some sense of importance in your life.
yeah. It is fascinating. Don't get me wrong. I think on whether it is like it's real fucking hard to explain. Um, as far as like not seeing it, but also being there, but even affecting me is like I don't know, I think the way it did affect me was okay, it's just a friend, they're just gonna move on kind of a thing. I didn't really be like, oh hey, why did you leave or why aren't you coming back kind of thing. Um I don't think it really actually affected me as much as anything else would with it, but all I can say is physically it didn't really affect me at all. But mentally, I did kind of want to question as I gotten older and gotten more people telling me of like, oh, do you remember this or with that? And I'm just like, what the fuck you talking about? Like I don't like what the hell kind of thing.
Well, that's another component to it. Is that right? It seems like those other events that were surrounding that other people relate to, maybe that's where the mask comes from. You have this experience that was very personal, unique to you that other people didn't see, that was happening
Yeah.
while all these other events were going on. And so maybe you relate your experience, your internal experience that you're having at the time to whatever external events were going on that maybe you were compartmentalizing there. You're kind of selectively choosing not to remember those events.
Yeah. I mean, I think that can be a thing. I don't know if it was because of like some other things that happened in the events, but I don't know. It did seem as if I never really thought of it ever until someone brought it up. Um, for like, oh hey, happy birthday, we're gonna talk about this. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Um, it's just it's out of the blue, and I do recall like a lot of my family members like constantly, no matter what, but just constantly asking me questions of like, do you remember this? And they were asking me like, how is the person? I'm like, I don't fucking know how to answer that. Like, what do you want me to say? Like, it happened. I was a kid. Most of it I don't really recall.
All right, we'll get on. We have comments. Um, Answers and atheism. Good to see you. Is there other varieties of spiritual atheists? Very true. Very true.
Mhm.
And I got Tobin. Remember, young children have active imaginations. They're also trying to become in tune with reality, and their senses are not fully developed.
Right.
Um, and that's kind of what I was alluding to there. So I can think of a lot of experiences I had when I was younger that I know that I imagined, um, right? But I never bothered to relate them to other people, right? Because I know that I imagined them. On the other
Yeah.
hand, like in contrast to like what you were saying about adults coming to you, like I have this opposite experience where I have a lot of adults uh, coming to me and telling me stories from my childhood as if I weren't there, which always bothers me when they relate a story to me like, oh yeah, that one time when you were a kid, and I'm like, I fully remember the whole thing, and now I feel like I'm being patronized. Uh,
Mm.
so I don't know. I go that way with it. Anything that I encountered, I think that I would say was like spiritual or supernatural. I usually experience later on in adolescence,
Mm.
and I felt like it was influence from outside. So I don't know. Like I wonder that about. I mean, I don't want to get too deep into your any deeper into your upbringing than you want to, but were you raised spiritual or religious, or did that have any influence on you? And hello, Joe. Good to see you.
um, I don't think that was ever brought up onto me. Um, I know with some of my family members, they were kind of religious in some way, but at that point, I don't think I've ever really stood as a kid growing up of what religion was or how it really became so. I don't really know how to answer that.
I mean, I remember even as a kid, I was in second or third grade, and I didn't really understand religion at all. But I know that a kid in my class who was um, some type of fundamentalist, I don't remember what he was, but he essentially explained to me what a bastard was biblically and why I was one of them, and that I was going to hell. And that stuck with me. It bothered me. But again, I didn't really, I think I ended up asking my mom, why don't we go to church, or what do we believe about religion, or something like that. Right. But it
Mm,
didn't amount to me believing what the kid said, although it was hurtful at the time. I was kind of, and I ended up being able to dismiss it. But some things like that kind of seep in a little deeper, I think. Um, and not too much longer, I had a babysitter of mine who I really looked up to. I had a crush on her. She was an older girl, a teenager, and uh,
mm,
and she ended up kind of giving me another spiel about blasphemy and disrespecting God and disrespecting the Bible, and that really sunk in. That really hurt me, and it stuck with me a lot longer. Right. So I think the relationship you have with that person can make a difference on like how how deeply you let that thing affect you, or for how long that it stays with you, or how it affects you psychologically, right? So if there's
yeah,
maybe a chance that anyone in your life had that type of influence on you, um, then you know, it might be something to consider. That maybe they said something to you that you don't necessarily remember them, remember having that interaction with them, but yet it could have stuck with you subconsciously. You know.
yeah. I honestly I think it could have been one of my family members. I don't really know. Because I know with one of them, they were like really super religious in some kind of a way, but I don't really recall them of like, oh, you need to be baptized or you need to read this and do that. I don't really think they've ever really done that. They might have. I don't know. I know there's been a lot of times I've refused to do certain things as a kid. But I don't know. I could probably ask some of like my family members, but we'll see how the answers would actually go on that. I kind of just stayed away from. I guess I could say as growing up, I did stay away from like a lot of churches and stuff like that. Never really like had some schedule of something.
Well, I do think it's a little bit problematic. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do this. I mean, you should
Yeah.
absolutely try to verify things in your life that have happened with other people who were there, friends and family or whatever. But I think,
Mm.
you know, when I'm asking you about your memories, your sense impressions, like, so you should have a something that you're able to answer in such a way that you're answering from your own recollection, right? Unless there's something that's blocking that recollection. It sounds like you seem to be saying that you don't have many memories from your childhood, or they're not very clear for some reason, right?
Yeah. The only thing that I do remember is like we've we've went to a lot of places. We jumped around a lot of other places, but I do remember like seeing a bunch of things as a kid with wherever the fuck we lived at, no matter what it was. It seems like something was there. Um, but it also seemed as if like either whatever it was could have scared someone in my family, so maybe like they're like, oh, let's not talk about this or let's not think about it. So maybe they're like kind of trying to block it in a way of I shouldn't be dealing with this or even thinking about that kind of stuff. But I've always wondered like my whole life of what exactly was I dealing with the things that I was seeing in my rooms, the things that I was kind of hearing in my rooms, thinking that some people was bad or constant bad. Um, if any of that was in fact true or not, like it's really hard to say of what was I actually thinking about at the time in certain ways.
Well, if you analyze it that way, it's going to be impossible because you could be thinking about a million different things from moment to moment.
Yeah,
And the mind just drifts that way. So, I mean, you have to wonder, like, what was happening around you. And it sounds to me like you were kind of isolated. And so, being stuck with yourself, you kind of invented a partner, right? A playmate
yeah. I
is what it
mean, I
sounds
could
like.
have. Yeah.
I think, it's telling that you never met the person who maybe is now attributed to the entity that you're thinking of, but you would like to think that you had known that person. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It
Uh,
does, with well, not a lot of things, but only towards that specific thing. So,
yeah, there may have been other things going on, um,
mm,
and you may have had uh, like heightened sensory awareness in some sense, to where things were coming in that weren't explained to you at the time. As a child, you're not processing them correctly. You don't have a clear understanding of what's going on, so you're receiving all these inputs, but you have no way to
mm,
express it. And so instead, you internalize and you make up a different explanation, right?
yeah, pretty much.
So, what other things other than the imaginary friend would you say were like the most relevant things, or unexplained things from your memory?
Um, there are, well, there is one thing that, like, I don't really exactly know, because in my mind, when I look at it, it looks like it could just be like a shadow and not like anything in particular. There's a photo of me when I was younger, um, with a family member of mine, and it to me just looks like a straight shadow from some angle. But at the same time, it could possibly be something else of like, was there actually something with me at the time in a different place or following me around that I don't know of? that I never really per se actually encountered or really experienced. Like I kind of just there's a lot of things that like in my mind of okay, as a kid, yeah, you don't really understand certain things, but did I create of like maybe I was scared of from movies or something that I might have seen that I shouldn't have? Of like I've invested of fingers crawling up doors or things trying to get to me in my room or something. Um I don't know. It's definitely something to try to get at.
It sounds very possible. I mean, I know I was exposed to a lot of media when I was young that definitely influenced me that way. And
Yeah.
when I think about why do I see strange things in my mind's eye, so to speak, I know they're not real, they are in my imagination, but I could see them very vividly in my imagination. And they have to do with things like death and things like torture. And I'm like, oh, well, I did happen to be kind of exposed to some of those things through media at a young age. So that could have something to do with it. I might have a natural propensity towards it to where it fascinates me and it doesn't revolt me in such a way, but it excites me. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, but I also know that there's a level of appropriateness to those thoughts, and sometimes when those thoughts become too um, too much for me to handle, I need to redirect those thoughts, and it's just a matter of doing that. Like there's just distraction, um, and yeah, I think Tobin's saying right now what I was going to say about the as far as photographs. You can get many different effects from the light and the angles in photography that can make and in video that make apparitions seem to appear. It's not very reliable. It usually has something to do with the device um, or the surrounding environment of where the photograph is being taken. Um,
Mm,
and it may be also that sometimes in those photographs, you'll attach a certain significance to the time and place that photograph was taken, and so then you want to see something deeper. And so if you see any type of apparition in that image, then you're probably going to focus on that. Oh well, there's something I didn't see before, and it seems really strange. And what else is beyond that? But
right.
again, that might be kind of a product of imagination taking hold.
Yeah, it could be.
Which I mean, I think there's utility to it. We make all kinds of amazing um, films, and people write books based on these things that we see in our mind's eye. So it's not like completely useless, but if we focus on it and try to make it real, then it might make us a little bit unsane, you know.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
um, but unless, again, and this is what I say, to contend that there are spirits or souls is kind of to contend uh, a universe that exists underneath or behind the natural universe that we observe, right? So when we're talking about this stuff, if we're going to say that there's something that was with me there at that time, but nobody else could see it, maybe I couldn't even see it, but somehow it was with me and it was an entity that I could communicate with in some way or interact with in some way, then we are proposing that there's something more than the natural observable universe, which would be definitionally supernatural, which is kind of where we start to get into religion or what is that or what is the connection there. And so it seems like you maybe don't have one. I wonder where you get the idea that there was a real experience beyond the internal one that you had.
Yeah.
But if it feels very real to you, are you reading Tobin's comment? Yeah. So
Yeah,
we've
I'm
been
reading
more
the
some
comments.
the effects of the camera, then asking about a supernatural thing, and then what method shows evidence of the supernatural? And the answer to that is there is none. We can
Yeah,
only
there
deal
really is.
with anecdotal experiential claims because there is no other. I mean, unless you trust, as I know you have done, and my friend Ben, who I had on the first episode of this podcast, has done spirit boxes, things like that. So, do you
Mhm.
want to talk about your experience with the spirit box? I know you've got some videos up.
Um, so technically, what a spirit box really is, if anyone does not really know what that is, there's, I mean, different ways you can really make it happen. It's just a radio of different channels that whatever is wanting to talk to you, um, will talk with that, or there's other devices of other spirits would like to talk through without using the spirit box that might be too loud for them. It's just like a staticky channel thing where there's some sessions that I've done, um, as to where there could be a possible thing of whatever would like to come through, um, doesn't actually want to talk about certain things. Like if you ask certain questions and it's silent, that's when you know they don't want to answer that. So you move on to the next question. You don't like antagonize them or provoke them to, try to actually get to answer you about it. But if you do try to like maybe ask it a different way that they could probably understand, they would. But at the same time, what some of these channels really do is like you can hear different languages that you might have not heard before, or noises that are like too fucking loud. It's mostly my fucking own ears. Um, like there was one session that I was asking a bunch of questions, and it seemed as if it was ignoring me, but it was interested in the person who I was in a call with on live stream. To where it wanted nothing to do with me. It's like fuck you, goodbye. I want this person. But there's another session I've done as to pose we've gotten like a little girl's voice come out, constantly saying like help me or anything like this. There's been some times we've heard like other people's real names come out that we weren't really expecting. Or as suppose of what they're actually doing, or of like if they didn't really actually like the person. There is one specific session I've done which I don't think I did on stream because I know I've done some in private as well. That this whatever entity was did not like my friend Jess whatsoever, wanted nothing to do with her. Liked talking with me for sure, but it waited until she left the room to start saying certain things of like I want her out, like it's trying to get her to leave the home, like never come back kind of thing. Or as to oppose, there are some spirits that, well, I call them salty because they will more likely will call you a bitch. They'll tell you to shut up or anything like that. But mostly to me it seems as if like whatever these sessions do or come about, does sometimes fascinate me, but also like most of it is kind of the same because you got like the same voices you got of whatever obviously comes through. Um, there's different like things for it, but yeah.
All right. Well, okay. I got a couple things to ask about that in a minute, but hello, Christian
Okay.
Carpenter. Good to see you. And got a couple comments here. Uh, Answers in Atheism says a repeated eidetic, is that eidetic experience may convince me of some sort of spirit realm. I'm gonna have to look that one up. That's beyond the expanse of my
Yeah, I
vocabulary.
never heard
Um,
of that.
I let me see. I'm gonna look it up now.
Okay.
Eidetic. Relating to or denoting mental images having unusual vividness and detail as if actually visible. Okay, a repeated eidetic experience.
Okay, that alright, I see where you're going with that.
Right. I don't know. I think hmm,
It
mental
can
images having unusual vividness and detail as if actually visible. I think I have had those. I've had a lot of those, and it still
I've
doesn't
had a
necessarily
lot of those too,
well.
actually.
But I understand and remember what it is like to hallucinate and is not exactly eidetic. Uh, when I hallucinate, for me personally, I actually think of um, things that when you talk about something that's surreal, like images melting together, those are more like my hallucinations usually, or things taking place in like a time lapse, but I'm sitting like
Mm.
in real time. I can see that. I would know the difference. Yes, you would. Um, and then Tobin says, when I play acoustic drums with the right room, I will hear an old school phone ring. I have even stopped to investigate, and it wouldn't still be ringing. I don't know if he meant would or would not still be ringing at that point. Um, and Tobin put the audio hallucinations can happen even while sober, and there's the definition for identity. Um, and and the experience you were speaking of is like so with these spirit boxes, if they function on radio waves, then radio waves interact with things, right? Like that we can
Yeah.
interact with radios. We know that there's interference, like in radio communications, to where I can be on a specific radio channel and get a call from essentially the wrong number, somebody who means to be on another radio channel, right? And then there's
Mhm.
frequencies in between those that pick up portions of both of those frequencies, right?
Yeah.
So it might not even be a hallucination. You may be hearing some real communication, but it's not actually directed towards you. You just happen to be listening in on somebody's public phone line.
Probably, yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah, it is. Like I think there was at one point, I don't remember if I did it on my main channel or on my ghost channel at the time, or maybe it was before I created that channel, that I had a few people that were interested in doing a spirit box session with me. I did it live. One of those people was Sammy, and he asked a specific question. And the question that he asked was like, "What's my father's name?" And it said his name twice in the actual voice that he heard. There could have been a point of like maybe I don't with these kind of things on spirit box sessions of I don't really know whether or not you're actually maybe imagining on like the voice that you want to hear come out, to see if it's like actually real or not. But with Sammy, he heard like three different things where it said his father's name twice in his father's voice. And then there was at one point randomly out of nowhere it said like his grandmother's voice in her voice. But at the same time I kinda didn't really catch that at the time. So I don't
Wait,
know.
wait. Were you using two different spirit boxes? Like he had one and you had one, or he was listening to yours?
Yeah, no, he was listening to mine. So
Hmm,
it's a little weird.
that is weird. But yeah, it may be that he was hearing what he wanted to hear at the time. I mean, that is possible.
Yeah.
And yeah, Tobin says those spirit boxes are more likely are catching radio frequency and electrical equipment. Listening to static can cause period,
Or
pareidolia. Pareidolia. The fuck is a spirit box?
yeah. What the fuck is this? Yeah, it's basically
Radio.
radio. Yeah.
Yeah. It communicates to the spirits out there. And then
Yeah.
he says, answer to the atheist says, melting is like psychedelic experiences, and those are different from hallucinations. Right. And I think there's an important distinction to be made there, because you can even have psychedelic experiences from things like you don't necessarily have to take drugs to have a psychedelic experience, but I think usually there would be some type of chemical alteration going on. But I think you can have a psychedelic experience from like um, dopamine and shit like that, something like that. Like it's so you can have. I think they say that children do experience or have psychedelic experiences because their brains are not fully developed, and so sometimes
Mhm.
when certain things kind of snap on inside the brain, and that's one of the reasons for the very vivid imagination in children. So you could still be having psychedelic experiences without having ingested anything, right? Just from the experience of your brain developing, type of a thing.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you remember it, but I do. As a kid, I remember in going through certain growth spurts um, where it has these bursts of unusual energy and creativity, and it would be like past dinner time, and I wasn't hungry, and I was just running around out there by myself, and I would make up these vivid stories, and I would imagine all these people were around me, but I would be by myself for the most part, and it would develop like a movie, and it was like so like intoxicating. Like that's the only way I can describe it. Like as a kid, I felt like I was getting high, but I wasn't doing anything. It was just using my imagination and making up stories and situations with people who weren't really there, and I thought it was like the greatest thing in the world. I was like, if only you could see what I see right now, you would just be having the most amazing time with me. But nobody else can ever see that.
Yeah, I kind of did that too as a kid. Not gonna fucking lie.
Yeah, you got some adult over there look at you, fucking goofy kid. But like to you, it's like it's the universe. Like it's in the palm of your hand.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't expect this. This doesn't have any explanatory power for what you were going through, right? But
No.
does, does it kind of give you some parameters for the questions you're asking yourself now, like moving forward? You think?
For the most part, some of it, yeah. I mean, like, there has been some things of like, okay, maybe this or that, but yeah, I mean, I'm obviously interested in like all the spirits and stuff, but at the same time, because I know I've questioned myself a lot over the years, and I think most of those questions kind of have been answered in certain ways. So it does kind of feel like some things did kind of like lift off my shoulders a little bit of like, okay, what the fuck was this, and or anything like that.
Yeah. Um, do you want to, like, what do you think? Do you have a thought on what spirits are? Why, like, do all of us have spirits, and are they always there?
Um, that is really hard to say because I mean, it's not that I like okay, like I never really actually seen a spirit, but kind of thinking, okay, maybe, even if you're alive, you probably have some kind of spirit in you that you never really knew of or anything like that. That could possibly, would just walk around while you're asleep, possibly, but I don't really know on how to really talk about that. Like, I don't really know. Like, I never really thought of that in any kind of way and point in my life, I don't think.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is something to think about. I mean, if you did encounter a spirit, why did only you encounter that spirit? Only a set number of people encounter that spirit, and only for a certain period of time, maybe, right? Um,
Yeah.
I did contend that maybe spirits are like a part of the passing down of knowledge from person to person. So maybe the human spirit might exist in the sense that we remember our fathers and our children remember us and so on and so forth. So we remember our parents and our, you know, children remember us, and the continuity of spirit exists in the idea that we knew what that person was like and we have the memories that we take of them, and they continue on in that way, in that sense. And then you can have spirits that are more prolific and have made it into art and literature. And now, oh yeah, that guy's been dead for 50 years, but I've seen, all of his movies, and I can still watch his movies. And in some sense, his spirit is there with
Right.
me that way. But you mean something more like the spirit which drives us to live, which drives us to do, which drives us to be who we are or what we are.
I mean, kinda, yeah. I never really thought of that way either.
Like the
Which
ghost
is
in the
kind of
machine, I
fun.
think they call it. There's got to be some energy source behind the physical mechanism,
Yeah.
right? Well, I mean, I think we're still looking for it. We are still looking for
Yeah, yeah.
it. Okay, and we got a few more comments here. Um, Answers in atheism says yes, there are spirits in radios. I hear people talking inside of them. Tobin says play static, and people hear things in the static. People also see things in the static in their television. So, um, something to be said for that. If you just see a conglomeration of pixels that make no particular image, your mind will still probably try to register an image. The same thing goes for sound.
Mm.
Answers in atheism. I've had most varieties of spiritual experiences and pretty much OD'd on every drug known to man. That is impressive. Um, I've OD'd a couple times, but only, yeah, usually on pharmaceuticals. But I don't think I ever really had spiritual experiences in that sense. The only time I had near spiritual experiences usually was when I was sober. Like when I went to jail, I had a bit of a
Mm.
spiritual experience. Um, and yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I would say, an enlightening experience on mushrooms, and I feel like that's part of the reason that I maintained it. I saw evolution take place in a way while I was on mushrooms, but it was like it was time lapse, so I was able to see this whole process, and it made sense. Um, and I saw one organism, you know, form from. Anyway, it's way too complex to actually explain. But when you see it as a visual, it blows your mind, man. Um, but I was already predisposed to believe in evolution at that point. Tobin says LSD and shrooms give me the experience that I should question my senses because your imagination can create extremely vivid experiences that don't comport with reality. Right. Um, and you can do that, as you said, stone sober. Adrenaline can make you do that. Awkward social
Yeah.
situations. Like, I was under the impression and was vocal about it that I felt that my supervisor was out to get me, right? Because I had this visceral experience with him, and it was like, is it visceral? Anyway, the point was, I felt like he was attacking me, and I responded in kind, and he was like, I don't know what this dude's trip is, right? Um,
Mm.
but all it really takes is any sort of mental effort, like, that makes you assume that things are a certain way. And you can imagine that they are a certain way, and you will react in reality that way, right?
Right.
And they say like all experience is sort of a hallucination like that. So I don't see why we wouldn't say that. Yeah, I'm gonna hallucinate if I'm gonna have an imaginary friend, if I'm gonna have a spirit or an entity, an angel on my shoulder, so to speak, or something like that. I can make that thing, and it will be entirely real to me. But that's subjectively real, not objectively real. Make sense?
Yeah.
Um, Answers in atheism. I've always been able to explain my psychedelic experiences. Yeah, I wish it were that simple for me. I could tell you like the stories, but it doesn't make the psychedelic experience. I'd probably write it on paper better than I could tell it as a story. Then I could read it out loud, and then it would make sense or something. The experiences can feel extremely real. Then you wake up out of them in honest ways.
True.
Answers in
Very
atheism
true.
had to go. They
Yeah.
OD'd on a drug called Navain, however, and that one is inexplicable. I OD'd on lithium. I think that was my first OD. Um, and most people don't have
Okay.
that problem, but I am allergic to metal. So
Mm.
no way of knowing that, right? Uh, and
No
lithium
one's in
is
the
big.
chat.
And they gave me an adult dose as a child. So yeah, that was my first overdose, administered by doctors. Good job, doctors.
Yeah, what the fuck?
William, good to see you. Coming for the end of the stream, I see, as I think we're probably wrapping it up. Unless, did you have final thoughts? I really want to give you some time to like mull all this over and come back at me if we could do the next Ghost Pack show. So, but I want to like, what does all this do to your brain? Tell me something.
Um, well, it does obviously make me think a lot, but it also makes me want to question um almost everything. But I'm also like kind of curious on like if we're actually going to maybe get some answers or find something as part of evidence or something like that. I'm not entirely sure. Um But it is something to really actually make you think a lot. Sometimes it hurts your brain if you think too hard.
Yeah, don't hurt yourself. But okay,
Yeah.
what in all seriousness, what type of evidence do you think would are you looking for? What would satisfy you to say that you had an explanation of, for what happened to you personally? Would you say? You don't have to explain all of
Um,
the history of the universe, but just your personal experience.
I mean, I would like to, like, maybe somehow kind of maybe, like, I don't know, get photos or, like, video evidence of actually seeing this in person. Um, with with everything that I've experienced, like, I would definitely like to, in a specific way, record of what I've been probably seeing or been dealing with. As far as like being touched or hearing voices in my head or anything like that, as far as something like that. I don't know if that's really actually something, but that's all I could really think out of my head.
Well, I mean, photographic video evidence are one thing. You're always going to have skeptics who are going to say, unless I can see it for real and touch it myself, I don't believe it.
Yeah.
But I mean, for your purposes, if that's what you feel you need, I'd also say maybe do some more research into those things that you're experiencing. If you feel you're having mental hallucinations, whether they're visual or auditory, maybe that could have something else to do with something physical. The same for sensation of touch. Um, it's like because I fall somewhere on the autism ADHD spectrum. I know that I have sensory issues and certain things appear to me in a way that they are not, right? But because I'm aware of it and I have that explanation for it now, and
Mm.
but I've always known that it was something that was not external to me, not something physical. But if you have a feeling that there is something external going on for you, then I could see how you're going to want to document that. But I mean, I would consider whether it might be in, going on internally rather than externally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
But I encourage you to investigate wherever your heart and mind desires. Um, do you want to show the? I think we already did this earlier, but go ahead. Your next stream, you said tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow around 12:30 or 1 p.m. Eastern my time. Obviously, it would be different for other people's time zones. Like it would be like 9:30 or 10 a.m. for your time. So.
Usually, I am awake by then. Today, I was not. Usually, I am awake by then. Last night was extraordinary. If you want to hear about that, go to the end of the last stream because I'm not going to bitch about it again.
Yep.
All
But yeah,
right.
we're
Well,
gonna be doing that tomorrow with just reviewing episodes on Mindless podcasts so far. So yeah.
oh, fun, fun. Yes, tomorrow is Monday, and we are doing it, and I will be there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, excellent. Uh, that's an appropriate stream wrap. See, now I'm forgetting things. I want to thank everybody who came by. We got William Better Late Than Never Freeman, Wascally Raccoon, Tobin Templeman. Gotta give you a little shit. Ghost, Plastic. Is that how I pronounce that? Ghost Plays X? I don't know.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
Ghost Plays, aka Chris.
okay. Yeah, I'm thanking people on the other streams too. They're over at Silverwolf's channel. Answers
Yeah.
in Atheism, Joe Day. And somebody else popped in here. I know that for sure. Christian
He's
Carpenter.
yeah.
Amazing. And I got everybody in the comments again because I'm the best host on YouTube. Everybody knows that. All right. Be well, be kind, stay trusty, and have a great rest of your day. And that's how we do it. Boom.